Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Good to be here.
Great to see you. Go ahead if you would like to do an introduction, and then the floor is also open for Q&A. If you want to join Zoom, there's a link on YouTube. And if you want to ask questions, you can raise your hand or type a chat. And go ahead, Neil.
Thank you, Emerson. Yeah, so I guess I'll just do a brief introduction, and then there'll be an opportunity to come on and ask live questions or to type a question into the chat, and I'll respond to that as they come up. This message is really simple. It's that there is no one and there is no separation. Everything else is just a conversation. It's very, very, very simple. And it's about something very, very simple and actually very ordinary. So the suggestion in this meeting is that this is already everything, which means that this needs nothing because nothing is lost. Nothing needs to be found, nothing needs to be added to this for this to be naturally itself, which is whole and complete as it already is. So if that's the case, then I guess the sensible question is, well then why are we here? Well, there isn't really a why. This is just what's happening. But you could say that this is a response, and that this is a response to an experience that arises within this, which says this isn't already everything. This isn't whole. This isn't complete. This does need something in order for this to be itself. Something does need to be found. There's something that is in some way hidden that needs to be discovered. So this experience, what I would call the separate experience, seems to arise out of contraction in the body. This contraction in the body is a center. It's a knowing. It's a knowing of here. It's the first thing that's known is here, which then becomes I. I am here. So the I then has a position, and this is the start of what I would call that separate experience, because I experiences itself as feeling separate from the whole. So then I spends the rest of its apparent existence trying to find ways to bridge this gap of separation, trying to find something that's going to make this feel whole and complete, to give this some kind of bring about some kind of a sense of unicity or wholeness or oneness. So the suggestion is that that experience of being separate, of being a person, of being a real person who is separate from the whole, is illusory. It isn't actually real. It isn't actually happening. Which is unbelievable to that experience from within that experience. Because within that experience of being separate, it feels very real. But it actually isn't. It's a dream. So because there is already no one, and there is already no separation, nothing needs to happen. Which is really great news, because nothing needs to be learned or gotten from this. Nothing needs to be understood about this. What can happen is the need to understand, the need to know what this is about, can fall away. And then there can just be unknowing. The experience of the me is a knowing. And that knowing seems to make everything else into something real. Through that knowing, I claims everything that's happening as happening to I by knowing it. When that separate experience, or when the I apparently collapses, then all that's left is unknowing. That knowing just disappears. So I don't mean not knowing how to make a cup of tea or drive a car, but in the knowing of this, it just falls away. And all there is unknowing, and that's unconditional freedom. This is completely without intention, without direction, without meaning, and without purpose. And that is unconditional freedom. And that is actually the freedom that's longed for. That's home. So I'll leave it there, and I'll open up for people to ask questions or type a question in the text, and I'll I'll respond. There won't be an answer, but there may be a response.
Go ahead, William.
Hi, Emerson. Hi, Neil. So my question is, when the sense of self falls away or doesn't appear to happen anymore, obviously I've heard it said that there's no longer any need for anything to happen or for anything to be different than the way it is. So my question is, when the sense of self is no longer there, does the sense also fall away that things could be any different than how they appear?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that sense of self, or the me, lives on an apparent timeline where something is happening. It's moving from one experience to the next experience. So it actually has that sensation of movement, of moving from one thing into the other. So when there is no longer that sense of self, there is no longer that experience of movement, of moving from one thing and to the next. So it's not that nothing needs to happen, nothing can happen, because there's nothing actually moving. This is no thing apparently happening.
And that's impossible to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. From within the me experience, yeah, impossible. Yeah.
So when you say nothing can happen, I experience real things happening in time, like what you described. Like there's a progression of movement through time and there are real changes. So when there's no longer a sense of self present, or when there's no longer anyone feeling separate, is there still, I don't know if awareness is the right word, but is there still an awareness or any kind of recognition of apparent changes in the appearance?
Well, there's no awareness, because for me, really, awareness is a kind of a knowing. And really, when I talked at the beginning, just for a little while about this arising of the I, really that is an awareness. Okay, so really, that what tends to fall away with that sense of self is that awareness. Okay. And
So there wouldn't be okay, I'll give you an example. So a body, whether it has a sense of self there or not, could change. Like there could be gaining weight, losing weight over apparent, well, what I perceive as time. That's one example. Would there be any recognition, if there was no longer a sense of self, that something changed or was different?
Well, there's apparent change, but not a real change in that way, because as you say, me has that experience of real change because it is living in a real sense of time. But that's how it already is. So I think you said earlier that you experience things in this way. Actually, you don't. There is just what's happening, and then there is a claiming of that as happening to you, which then sort of makes it into something real and into something solid. Because it's something real and something solid, it has a position, and because there is a position, there is a experience of there being things, from which in between things there is space and time, where things seem to happen. What's left in the end is just the whole, which is no thing. So there are no things, there is no space and no time for anything to happen. So actually happening in that sense is an impossibility. Already, there is just a claiming of that experience as that's happening to me, which makes that happening into something real. That's not to say that this is unreal. I would say that it's neither real nor unreal. It is just an appearance. It's just what seems to be arising, what seems to be happening. But for no person, there's no one in it having an experience of that and claiming that happening is happening to themselves. So it's empty.
And so when you said that I say I experience things happening or experience change, and you said that's not happening. So as much, I don't get any of this at all. But yeah, where my mind goes when I hear that is, so there's a sense that I'm experiencing, and what you're saying is that that isn't an actual experience in terms of a movement through time of experiencing different events. there's just what seems to be happening, and part of what seems to be happening is just a feeling that I'm experiencing something moving through time. I'm just asking to clarify if that's what you meant.
No, absolutely. But that is the nature of an experience. An experience is something that to me feels measurable, as in it has a beginning and an end, in order to define that as an experience. And in order for there to be that experience, then there has to be then the experiencer at the center of that having that experience, and labeling it as an experience, because it has that sense of a beginning and an end. So this experience is then happening to me. Me is the experience within which other experiences seem to happen. But when me is the experiencer and the experience, you could almost say. So when the me does fall away, or apparently fall away, it's recognized there was never anyone experiencing anything. There was never any real experience happening in that way.
And so, before the apparent falling away of you, the things that would have apparently happened in that story that would have been experienced as real prior to that, now that there's no longer a sense of self there's no longer a sense of that story having happened.
Well, no, there was never a story, because actually, and this is the thing, the part that's impossible to imagine, well, one of the many parts of this message that's impossible to imagine, is that actually, in the end, when that experience is apparently over, it's recognized that it was never actually happening. That it was just a dream. I can't think of a better word for it. I know a lot of speakers use that word. I really can't think of a better word for it. It's like, that wasn't happening. That was a dream. From within the dream, it seemed real. But then when the dream is over, it's recognized that it was never happening. So there was never any real experiencer. There was never any real experience happening. There was just a timeless everything apparently happening.
And so you wouldn't say that things are different now?
Oh, it's vastly different from within that experience, but nothing's changed.
But would you say that
really changed?
Nothing's changed because there was no movement from one thing to another thing?
No real movement from one thing to another, no.
But when you say it's vastly different, would that be in terms of the character, like the personality and things like that?
No, not really. I think the character is just something that occurs naturally in the body, conditioning. It's kind of in the DNA, in the genes, I think. But no, there's no real change in that sense. There was just a claiming of what was happening as happening to me. This is happening to me, and that seems to create a kind of a neuroticism and a whole experience, a whole kind of neurotic experience of, and this is the experience of the individual. So it's not just characteristic of here. This seems to be the experience for the individual, is that it's kind of caught in this dilemma of feeling separate. So it needs to find ways to kind of make this okay. And it does that by thinking that it is making real choices and real decisions in order to make this work, to find what it feels is missing, to make this into home.
So it's a dropping. Well, you might say that effort is illusory, even in the sense of feeling separate, but it's just a dropping of the whole effort that I've got to do, or I need to make something happen.
I wouldn't say exactly that. It's that there is no one left to make an effort, or who needs to make an effort. So there's nothing found or discovered in the end. Really all that happens is the seeking appears to come to an end with the recognition that there's no one seeking. Nothing is ever found. So there's no real change because there isn't a different experience. It's actually the end of experience. And with that end of the experience, you could say the natural reality is revealed, which is just as it is, and always has been, so to speak.
It's impossible for me to believe, because not that I've had, but there's been so many glimpses of this over the last 12 years or whatever it's been. And before I came across this message, I didn't know what that was. And the sense of self always came back. And it's impossible to believe that that could just fall away and never return. But would you say that, given that there's no free will and choice anyway, that apparent collapse or the melting away of the self is going to happen regardless?
Well, it's already over, because it isn't actually happening. But that experience comes to an end, or seems to come to an end when it seems to come to an end. There's nothing. Even that experience, even that apparent separate experience, is what's longed for appearing as that separate experience. It is the whole appearing as that separate experience. And that's what just became suddenly obvious here, is that even the seeking for itself is itself. And the whole thing just fell in.
Because where my mind goes when you say that it's the whole appearing as that, I think, well then, so there's no reason it needs to stop, there's no reason it needs to continue, but you've said it's already not happening.
It can't stop. Seeking can't stop. The nature of seeking is to seek. But it actually isn't going anywhere. And as you say, it's impossible to imagine. It really is impossible to imagine. Yeah.
Thanks a million, Neil. I appreciate it.
All right, well, thanks. Okay, so there's a question in the chat from Kane Watts. Can you talk about the peace? Or can you talk about peace? Yeah, well, as I was just saying to William, there does seem to be a whole neuroticism that comes along with this me energy of trying to find ways to make my life work, and what do I need to do about this, and what should I do about that, and what about him over there, what are they doing, how do I fit into all of this, and trying to kind of work everything out from that position. So that kind of neuroticism falls away. So I would say that there is a tremendous psychological release. Yeah, it's just a kind of a release. So yeah, it does. It can in a way feel more peaceful, but it's not peace as in the way you might imagine. Think like I used to read about in books. The unperturbed mind, the trying to be as still as the surface of a lake, and all of that kind of thing. It's nothing to do with that. Yeah. What we're talking about is unconditional freedom. Because it's unconditional, it can be anything. So it could appear as swearing at someone who cuts you up in traffic. It can be anything. It can be eating a tub of ice cream in front of Netflix. Rage quitting your PlayStation. It can be anything. But all of that it's just what's happening. So it does seem that when there's no one having experience of being in that and trying to kind of pull all the strings and push all the buttons to try and make this work, which is amazing, really, isn't it? That me thinks it's doing it. Then there's a big relief in that sense. There's another question from Rajiv, who says, "What is this?" Well, you can't say what this is. So I've already used words like it's already everything. It's unconditional freedom. It's just what apparently is and isn't. I say it is and isn't because you can't say what this is. It's just what seemingly appears. And another question from Rajiv. If everything is wholeness, then seeking is also wholeness, isn't it? Absolutely. Yep. And Girish Chavan has his hand raised. Emerson, do you do this part?
Go ahead, Girish,
Harry
unmute
or
yourself.
someone?
Hello.
Okay.
Hello,
Hi, Girish.
everyone. So I have one question. When you say about the total freedom, about nothingness, okay? So is that your relate some when you say it is total freedom? That also would not be there as per
I'm
because
sorry,
no one is there.
Yeah, so so the freedom we're talking about is unconditional freedom. So
Yeah,
it
but
doesn't
there
have,
also there is no one that also no condition also should be not there and unconditional should not be there.
well, there's actually no one there already.
Because
So
in my experience
conditional
during
freedom
this
would
talk,
be there has to be someone who falls away in order for this to be unconditional. Suggestion is that unconditional freedom is also the appearance of there being someone there who doesn't feel free. That's what
during
makes it
this during this talk series of nothingness, I observe in my experience the life there is life energy, but the dead form or potential. It has its potential, but dead form. And now we are in life form.
Well, all form is no form appearing to form. This is no thing appearing to form. It's unconditional freedom appearing to be a pen. This is unconditional freedom appearing as a pen. Everything is unconditionally free already.
I'm not getting.
It's even the thought that I don't feel free, I'm not free. Even the sense of I is unconditional freedom appearing as that.
Yes, when we lost the I, there is only energy. There is nothing.
Well, the suggestion is there's nothing already. There actually isn't an I to lose.
Yes. That is true. Only potential energy we can actually we relate or we give that meaning because this is in regular life we give meanings. So
Yeah, well, the I gives itself meaning. It lives and
yes.
moves in the story of itself. I is a story, but it lives and moves within the story of itself. It's like a little self-perpetuating loop. It just kind of goes round and round. Yeah.
Totally in we can in totally in present now.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand, Girish. Can you say that again, please?
Is nothingness totally in present?
Is nothingness total?
Total just present. Present.
Well, I'm not sure about the word present. There is just no thing appearing.
Yes. No,
It's
let's
everything.
just
Yeah.
stop. In the when we in meditation or we just in silence in peace, there is nothing. Actually, we experience that thing.
Yeah, what you're describing is actually conditional freedom. That in meditation.
No, I am not describing also. I'm just
there
not
is
talking with you. Just I'm describing.
Okay, so I would describe as experiences I had when I was a seeker in meditation of feeling peaceful and getting a sense of wholeness or nothingness. I would
No,
describe
there is
that.
no sense also.
Yeah, so I would describe that as I would describe that as a conditional freedom, because the sensation with that in that seeking experience is that it has to be about being peaceful. It has to be about a sense of nothingness. It has to be about quieting the mind. It has to be about something that I associate with freedom. Unconditional freedom could be anything. So it could be screaming that, it's the Sex Pistols. It's rock and roll, it's noise, it can be anything. It could be at a rock concert, it could be sitting in meditation. It could be going to the pub, or it could be going to satsang. Neither are going to bring you any closer to what is already, because it is already.
Thank you.
Thank you, Girish. There's a question in the comments again from Rajiv. Is talking about it and not talking about it exactly the same? I wouldn't call this it. This is it. Makes it sound a bit too, makes it sound like a something. I would say this is no thing. And actually, this is never talked about. It can't be talked about. We can talk about the experience of what it is, feeling separate, that arises within this. But actually what's being pointed to can't be described, it can't be talked about. There's no separate position to point from. There's nothing to point to. It would also be the pointing. How do you describe that? You can't. So yeah, talking about it and not talking about it, or talking about this and not talking about this. Yeah, it's kind of all the same. Yeah.
Go ahead, William.
Hiya. So my question is, the apparent ending of the sense of feeling separate is never, would it be different in each case for each apparent person that appears to die?
Good question. No, I don't think so.
I'll give you context of why I asked that. I should have given the context first, really. When Kane wrote in the comments and you answering about the piece, you said there's a large amount of neurosis there as a separate person, and there seems to be a release from that. And
well, what I said was it's a neurotic experience being a me.
Okay.
Seems to be a neurotic experience being a me. I mean, there's no there's no absolutes in that sense. There's going to be a different story for each apparent individual. Yeah, there's conditioning. There's going to be different conditioning here to different conditioning there. There may be a preference for chocolate ice cream. Here, there may be a preference for vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of, so because I've been listening to this message for about a year now, roughly, or just less, and talking on Zoom with different speakers that I'm sure you know as well. And I wouldn't say the neurosis has gone completely. I'm still mental, but there's a lot of neurosis that seems to have lifted already, and I'm still experiencing myself as a person. So I guess I'm just trying to work out what will happen when the sense of self isn't there, in terms of, would there still be a huge amount of neurosis even further that gets lifted, or is it impossible to say what will happen?
Well, at risk of putting my head on the chopping block, I would say that there can be a relaxation with listening to this message.
And that was
of that neurotic experience. There can be for those, I think, who resonate with this type of message, or this this type of sharing, there can be a relaxation. There may be a kind of an undoing of some knots in a way.
That's what it seems like.
But that's not unique to this message. That could happen to an individual who goes to therapy. He's got some issues to work through. There could be a relaxation in that sense there as well. Just for some people hearing this, there can be a relaxation.
And I mean, I know you wouldn't, well, I'm just assuming you wouldn't give any value to anything that happened before the sense of self falling away. But were you interested in this message for a while, or did it sort of just collapse?
Not very long. Not very long. I came across it and it all was over quite quickly.
Lucky man.
Well, yeah, it's not really. There was definitely a point where I thought this isn't what I want, where I hadn't quite died, and there was definitely a point of where there was just utter terror holding on for dear life. This wasn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
But then I died, and there was just everything. It's just what it is. Apparently.
Nice. I think also
I thought it would save me some money as well if I died, a bit sooner rather than later. I thought it might save me some money and some traveling.
Another thing I was going to say, because I guess I can't help but hear this and think this is something I want so desperately. Like like when I first started listening to this about 10 months ago, whatever it was, I thought, okay, this sounds great. I want to get this, but there was still a lot of other things I was interested in getting to. Now it's just like, this is all that matters. I don't want anything more than the end of the sense of being someone seeking. And I've lost interest in anything. Well, virtually everything else I've lost interest in. And I can't help but think that, like, when you say things like there's a release from the neurotic experience, I can't help but hear that and think, I need that. Like, that just sounds so appealing. That's why I keep trying to work out and predict what it would be like when there's no self there. But I know that's just an impossible thing anyway, to imagine what that would be like.
So going back to what you were asking initially, what seems to be a commonality is that it's a shock. It's a shock. Because it is unimaginable. And that's not to say that it's so obtruse and wild and far out, man. It's very simple and ordinary in that sense, but it is a bit of a shock. Yeah.
So, because I'm imagining that you would have had ideas before the sense of self dropped of what it would be like.
Yeah. So when I was a seeker, there was definitely a resonance with this, but I couldn't have told you what that was or why or what that was about. It almost seemed counterintuitive to be so attracted to and compelled by a manner of speaking, which is telling me I can't get it. Doesn't make any sense at all. Which is why I think if this message is heard or resonated with, well, I know if this message is heard or resonated, it has nothing to do with the individual whatsoever. That's
good news.
This has nothing for that experience. This isn't a denial of that experience, but it denies that experience what it thinks it needs by saying it isn't real.
Yeah, I'm feeling a strong resonance as you're talking. A really strong resonance.
Yeah, it's just what's happening.
Okay. But there's no value of any kind to the resonance?
No, there's no value to anything.
That's another impossible thing.
Which is what makes this unconditionally free. Me lives in a world of this is good, this is bad, this is better, this isn't. Dum, 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 dum. All the time. It's just everything, which is also nothing. So it holds no value in that way.
And when you say it's a shock, would you also say that it's impossible to imagine the simplicity of, it might not be the right way of saying it, life after liberation, or when the sense of self drops, it's unimaginable, the simplicity of it? Because when you talk about me living in the good and bad, that's, for me, I don't know how it's experienced in other cases, it's like this constant analyzing of what's good for me, what's bad for me, what do I want to stay away from, and it makes this huge complication out of everything.
What's impossible to imagine is that everything that's happening there right now is what's longed for.
That is impossible to imagine, because when you say that, the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm living in this, well, I experience a divided reality of good and bad, and trying to analyze what I should be doing and how I should be behaving and all these things. You're saying that's what's longed for. And I'm thinking, but if there was no sense of self there, that whole divided reality wouldn't be going on. So
Yeah,
what
well,
you're
it
saying
isn't.
then is
It isn't actually going on, which is why it's which is why I refer to it as an illusion or illusory. If you look up the word illusion in the Cambridge English Dictionary, it says something like, I'm paraphrasing, an experience which creates a false or misleading impression of reality. So what's happening with that separate experience is it is seemingly creating a false or misleading impression of reality, which sort of covers over the natural reality as it is. Sort of, apparently.
it's amazing to hear it, because the resonance is so strong, and yet I can think of every argument why it can't be that way, but I can't deny it at the same time.
That's a perfectly sane and rational response to what's being said.
It's awesome and it's crazy at the same time, but I do love listening to this, so thanks again.
Thanks, Will. So there's a load of stuff that's come up in the chat. I'll backpedal a little bit and see if I can catch up to it. Does Girish have his hand raised?
Oh no, he's already
Oh,
John,
okay. I've scrolled back too far then.
yeah. I think the
message,
next talking about it, that's the one that last.
That's right, yeah. So there's a question from Kane Watts. Kane, hi Kane. Do you feel sorry for criminals that go to prison for their actions, as there is no free will or control in what they do? Yeah. That's just what's apparently happening, yeah. No, I mean, there is no free will. No one's choosing to commit crime or go to prison. Yeah. There might be a feeling sorry for someone, though. I don't know. Might be a walking down the street and feeling bad for the guy sitting under a cash point who is asking for some money. Yeah, it might be. A comment from Earl Gibbs: the me or self's attempt to try and understand this message is futile. Absolutely. Because it isn't there. Mark Smith: what the me is seeking is its own absence. And that is what it can never have. Actually, me isn't seeking its own absence. Me would never want its own absence. Me is seeking the next big experience. And me can only see so-called liberation as being the great experience. This is going to be the experience to end all experiences, and I'll no longer have to have any more experiences because this experience is going to be the one. That's what me is looking for. for me isn't looking for the end of itself. Message from Puya Mo. The whole spirituality will end to empty words, nothing to get and get back to life. Isn't it funny? All the teachers already know human minds are so busy, they do their best to sell their words. Thank you, Puya. Question from Rajiv. Do you come full circle at the end of the pathless path? No, because the pathless path is still a path. And there's nothing actually traveling in a circle to come full circle. There's nothing actually moving even around in a circle. I know I did a little thing of the individual goes round and round. That just seems to be the experience. It's not actually happening.
There's a question there from John. John, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks, Emerson. Hi, Neil.
Hi, John.
I'm the expression unconditional love. I know that you know we use it in our conversation, and probably when we're talking to the people who are nearest and dearest to us, and you know we really could feel you know, sort of selfless feelings of being prepared to do anything for that person. But I understand within the context of what you're saying, you know, when I think about that type of relationship, I can always see where the limits are. And I can always see where there actually are some conditions. Inevitably, there are some conditions. Whereas when I hear what you're saying, I understand that unconditional really means unconditional. I mean, absolutely no limits at all. And so if you're in a situation of no limits at all, it seems to me almost like the word that comes after the word unconditional sort of loses its meaning in a way, because within the unconditional, you know, everything could fit within that, not just love, but all the other feelings.
Absolutely, yeah.
Although I suppose that all the other feelings that, you know, like hate, jealousy, sorrow, all of those, I mean, I heard it said yesterday, and it really struck me that they are essentially modalities of love. But the sheer unconditionalness of it, I mean, that is like really no conditions at all, and that's what's so hard to imagine.
Yeah, when there's nothing left to fall in love with anymore, there's just love. But that, just to be clear on that, that's not that this walks around with this constant sense of being in love all of the time, because it's unconditional, so it can appear as anything.
Exactly. So I mean, so what might to another person might seem to be inappropriate, or might be ticketed as negative feelings, like, you know, anger or resentment, or well, I don't know about resentment, but, you know, disgust. I mean, I as I hear it, those feelings can arise or not. The only thing is that they are not arising for any particular person.
Yeah, anything can arise. I would say that there's a difference between there are natural feelings that seem to arise, and when things like anger do arise, they tend to be quite sort of flash in the pan, and it's all over very quickly. But yes, it's not happening for anyone. It's just sort of seems to happen. It just, anger can be a response to something. I wouldn't say, and this is where the perhaps a sort of a difference is. I would say there's a difference between anger and resentment. Resentment sounds like something that is accumulative and ongoing.
Yeah,
like the difference between suddenly feeling anxious and having anxiety.
Yeah.
So a feeling anxious might arise, a feeling angry or anger might arise, but I wouldn't say things like resentment or having anxiety as a kind of an ongoing accumulative process seems to arise.
because they only really make sense in time. I mean, that
Absolutely,
the re at the front of the resentment suggests something going round in
Exactly.
circles, and that's
Yes.
not what is not happening here, because we're not in a time frame.
It just moves straight through. Yeah. Me experience itself as moving in that way, whereas actually everything is just kind of like that. That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense, but more like that.
Okay, I get it.
But yes, you're right. Yeah. So what the individual does is it takes ownership of emotions and feelings as they arise and sort of turns them and into something. It gets a hold of them and wrestles with them to a certain extent, because it has this kind of whole self narrative within the story of itself of this is good, this is bad, this is right, or this is wrong. I shouldn't feel like this. I should feel like that. Or I should be more grateful. Or I should be more loving. I should have more compassion for that person sitting under the cash point. It's constantly in this sort of judging and weighing everything up, as a personal experience is happening to it. How do I manage this? What do I do with this? And obviously, without the sense of self, then there isn't that happening. But again, the suggestion is, I always come back to, is that actually isn't happening.
Yeah.
That is the natural reality, if you like. It's just a kind of it's a dream experience which seems to happen. It's kind of like a fog which seems to just kind of settle onto everything that appears, everything, thoughts, feelings, sensations, everything, and then just get sort of experience, because it is for the individual an experience, through this kind of fog, where it's just turning it into something that it isn't. It's an assumed experience that isn't actually happening.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Question from Yasmin. Hi, Neil. I like your calm and clear expression. You resonated mostly with Jim Newman at the apparent time, right? And would you say that emotions are less sticky, like what you just discussed about anger and anxiety? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, really, Jim Newman's videos were just the first one that just happened to come up in my YouTube feed one day. I was probably trying to understand some ancient Indian teaching of some kind and not getting very far with it. And it just sort of came up, YouTube does recommended videos thing, and it just came up. And yeah, it's just, I was cool. So yeah, that was just happenstance, if you like. And would you say that emotions are less sticky? Yeah, because there's nothing for them to stick to. As I say, they're not being kind of taken hold of and wrestled with, fought with, or there's nothing that needs to accept emotions or detach from feelings, emotions, or whatever is arising. There's no one to do that. So yeah, anxiety sort of has a stickiness, as in it would get stuck and go round and round and round. Yeah. Rajiv says Jim Newman's style of presentation is atom bomb for the me. Huh. Yeah. This message is an atom bomb, but not for the me because there isn't one.
Go ahead, William.
Neil, would you say that what's being suggested here, which isn't speaking, you said that this isn't actually, what's being pointed to is never actually spoken about. And you also said it's not an it's nothing. Would you say it is the last thing the individual wants?
Yeah, totally. Because it's the end of itself, the apparent end of itself, which it doesn't want. Everything me does is to perpetuate the experience of itself.
Yeah,
so it's constantly seeking more self-affirming experiences, which is why quite often things like self-inquiry can just become about being it is about being a self-confirmatory experience.
So everything that the me apparently does is a way to constantly affirm that it's real.
Yeah, well, it has a sense of position, but in a strange way, it's also looking for its position, it's looking to solidify its position by adding experiences to itself, sort of give it mass and gravity by adding on. Apparently, I mean, this is just a story. And that's what seems to happen within that experience. It's looking for things to add on to itself, and it sort of accumulates a kind of a mass, if you like, which creates more gravity coming back in, pulling more and more experience to itself.
And because the position...
That's just a story.
Because the position can never be fixed or like solidified, that's why there's that constant need for more and more. Like, it's never enough.
Well, there actually isn't a position, which is why I say that's just a story. That's just how that experience seems to be.
It makes a lot of sense about trying to build the mass and the gravity. It's because the reason I asked just now that is this the last thing that me wants, is because when you were saying to me before that towards, I don't know exactly what words you used, but towards the end there was a lot of terror. You really didn't want it. You were trying to hold on. Because I still have this narrative going around that this is something I want. So obviously I've got some expectation of like something that's not what you're trying to point to.
Yeah, well, me is looking for the ultimate experience. But it may associate that experience with what it thinks is being shared here, which is serenity and peace and a psychological relaxation. And these, I mean, they're just words, they're just concepts, really. But yeah, me would as with everything else, take what's being shared here and add it to itself, or try and add it to itself. Can't get very far with this message, but yeah.
Because even though this message clearly says there isn't anyone and there's already no one, it's impossible for me to think of this in any other way than Neil's gained something by no longer being there.
Me wants to know there's no one. So he wants to know that there's no one. I understand that there is no one. I know that there is no one. I know that this is about unknowing. There's no one to know that there's no one, and there's no one to not know that there's no one.
And I could ask the same questions. I'm sure I have asked the same questions over and over and over and over and over and over again, because like you said, there's never actually an answer given. There's just a response. So even the content of what you're saying in terms of no one knows there's no one, what you were just saying, the content's more or less irrelevant, would you say, of the words that are coming from the response?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they're just words. Like I said, this message is very simple at the beginning. This message is there is no one and there is no separation. Everything else is just a conversation. It's just chit chat.
And the constant attempt of the me to get at this and understand it and make sense and work it out, because you're saying the message is just really simple. And I'm
that
thinking,
was it. I just said it in 4 words or 5 words, whatever it is. I didn't count. 5, 6 words.
Yeah,
really. And even that, I mean, there isn't really a message. It's not like no thing has a message for William. I'm sorry to say. I know that's very disappointing.
yeah.
This isn't communicating a message. It's a non-message. It really isn't a message.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, well, if I still haven't got it yet, then it must be something extremely complicated. I need to work harder at figuring it all out.
Yeah, maybe one day William will just give up.
Fingers crossed.
But William doesn't have any choice over that as to when that happens, because actually William already isn't there.
Thanks.
Any questions? A question from Yasmin. I don't think I read this out already. So feelings like rage and anger could still appear based on the conditioning of the body-mind, because one would often connect certain feelings like anger and rage with a strong sense of me. Thank you. Well, me would connect it with a strong sense of me. Yes, of course, because me connects everything to itself. Based on the conditioning of the body-mind, possibly. I would go as far as to say that there isn't a mind. I think really a mind is just a claiming of the mental experience of me that seems to happen within that separate experience. I tend to think of it almost as the mental manifestation of me. That this is my mind, I have a mind, and it's this shaped and everything appears in my mind. And this is what happens inside my mind. That's not really how it seems to be here. So no, I wouldn't say it's a conditioning of the mind as such. I would say that the mind is part of that illusory experience. But yes, it might be about conditioning. What's acceptable in some social circumstances for one set of conditioning might not be acceptable in another. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. In Japan, they eat raw sea anemones. Can you imagine? I wouldn't fancy that. So one could argue there would be a conditioning here that would not like to eat raw sea anemones or tarantulas. They eat tarantulas in some parts of the world. So perhaps
they take spikes off.
Yeah. Oh, do they? Okay. And the fangs. Yeah. So yes. So responses could be due to a conditioning. To answer that question. Yeah. But they have nothing to do with me. Me then claims that emotion as this is my emotion. And in that claiming and that ownership, it then thinks it has to do something with that emotion. Although there is then a narrative around that emotion of, oh, I shouldn't be angry, or I should be more loving, or I should be more compassionate. It's like it's in a permanent state of 1 o'clock half struck. It's not actually, it doesn't actually do anything or go anywhere. It's never had a thought or an emotion or a feeling. It's just in a constant stuckness, just almost there and experiencing, and seems to create this kind of dynamic that we're talking about. And a question from Monica Wagnerova. Everything is freedom, but I have own opinion about how freedom and life should look. And this is suffering. And is this suffering? Well, I think, yeah, the experience for me, the seeking comes out of a sense of that I am suffering. but it really comes out of the sense of separation, and then there can be a kind of an existential suffering that seems to come out, that seems to be a part of that separate experience. So yeah, me definitely has a narrative about how it thinks life should look. Well, apparently, again, it's just a story because there actually isn't me. But yeah, that seems to be what happens within that me experience. Is that it has an idea of what it thinks should or should not be, and that's conditional. Me wants conditional freedom, and going back to William's question and answer, it doesn't want unconditional freedom because it's not involved with unconditional freedom, even though it is unconditional freedom appearing as that experience of being me. Me likes to think it's in control. Me wouldn't be in control of unconditional everything. A question, I think, from Michael Richardson Bourne. The world is illusory, only Brahman is real, Brahman is the world. Ramana Maharshi. Where does the third part come in if this is comes to an end? Isn't there a sort of reintegration of this is, i.e. impersonal existence is seen to live both personal and impersonal experience? Well, there isn't a personal and an impersonal experience because there isn't experience. All experience does seem to be the personal experience. So there actually isn't a reintegration because that would suggest that there is some kind of a process or a movement into wholeness or into oneness, that there is a real me that can find some way to become one with everything. And the suggestion is in this meeting that this is already whole. So nothing is going to happen because nothing needs to happen. And in fact, it's actually an impossibility for anything to happen, for this to become something else or other, because it is already itself. Suffering would be that it happens to me. That's from Bikash. Yeah. Well, suffering just seems to be a part of the me experience, particularly for the seeker. I wouldn't say that everyone who's in that experience of being an individual is necessarily suffering. It does seem that the seeking does tend to come out of a suffering. I think some people are more sensitive to the sense of being separate than others, those who are seeking. In the end, it's recognized that there was never anyone suffering. And Bikash says, I can see how stupid this all is, but it doesn't hit home. A question from Howard Chance, do you have a brain that exists in time and space? Not really, no. There's apparent time and apparent space, and there's an apparent brain. No, it would just be a story. What happens when there is a sense of being a me is that it will make that statement into something real. There is real time and there is real space through which I move and have experiences. Oh, Rajiv asks, is losing interest in spirituality while at the same time being totally relaxed in the polarities of life a sign that the seeking energy has dropped? Apparently. Well, who would know that the seeking energy has dropped other than the seeker? It may be that there's just a natural losing interest in spirituality or certain teachings, sure. But that would be what's just naturally happening. Nico Haki says, me gets to experience a wonderfully meaningless little story in a human body, apparently. Yes, absolutely. And yeah. Earl Gibbs says, the illusory sense of the me veils the potentiality of resonating with what is being shared. Well, if, as I said before, if there is a resonating with what's being shared, it has nothing to do with the me. But me does tend to experience everything through a kind of a veil of separation. It's like a me-shaped prophylactic. There's another part to that joke, but I won't go there.
Have you received the certificate of enlightenment yet that I sent you?
That, Emerson. No, not yet. I still haven't come with $1 million.
All right. Okay.
Let's see how
when
well
you
the
come,
book sales do.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's ready if you are.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah. I'll keep saving. Star 82 stars. Straight to stars. What would you ask yourself if you were me? I think that says. Well, I'm not you. I would just say there isn't a you. From Yasmin, would you say there is apparent cause and effect? Apparently, but not really. This is an effect without a cause. It just seems to be effectness. There's no real cause.
If anyone has any live question, you can raise your hand. Do you have a question, John? I saw you pop your face there. Oh, no. Okay. All right.
From Yasmin, apparent cause and effect, as in you cut your finger and it bleeds. Yeah, apparently. Yeah, of course. Yeah. But there would only be, if there was a bleeding finger, there would only be a memory of the cutting. So that would really just be this appearing as that. So that's why I would call it an apparent cause and effect. There is just there is just the effect. The cause would just be in a memory. It would be the effect appearing as a memory of the cause. Girish Chavan asks, how's your day-to-day life with nothingness? Well, I don't have a life. So there isn't day-to-day life. And there's no one having an experience of nothingness. There's just what apparently happens, which is just immediate. It's just immediacy as it arises. Yes, there can be thoughts of what to have for dinner. Yes, there can be thoughts or memories of what I had for breakfast. But all of that is appearing in the immediacy of this. Rajiv asks, does looking for answers hide the solution? There isn't a solution. Me's looking for an answer. It's looking for the solution to itself. It's looking for the solution to the dilemma that it that it seems to be caught up in. But there actually isn't an answer to be found. It's just that the questions can just dissolve, the questioner can just fall away. Nothing is ever found. In the end, nothing is ever found. Neil Denham didn't find an answer. The questions just fell away. And Monica asks if this resonates, it has nothing to do with I. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is the same when people enjoy sport or resonate with sport, is not depending of I. Yeah, because there isn't an I. So yeah, no one is playing sport, so no one's enjoying playing sport. So for some seekers, conditional freedom might be abstaining from sport or activities. I mean, yeah. But there's actually already no one doing that. There's no one engaging in activities. It's just what seems to apparently be happening. Are we living in a simulation as human? No idea. I think there's some good podcasts on YouTube if you want to get into that sort of stuff.
William has a question. Go ahead, William.
What I would say is that a lot of these kind of theories, because it is a theory, isn't it? To the best of my understanding, I don't know much about this theory. It's a theory, which is coming out of a need to know, or a need to understand what this is. If this was a simulation, there would be no one here who would need to know if we're in a simulation or not. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry, Emerson, did you say someone had a question?
William, go ahead, please.
I'm completely threatened and baffled at the moment, because when you said about this is effect without cause, I can't escape the sense that this has to have come from somewhere. What's appearing this meeting? So, I mean, I could tell you my story about it. It doesn't make a difference whether I tell you it or not. But like, you heard Jim, then you went to a retreat with Jim. The sense of being a person fell away. Now there's speaking about it. I was talking to Jim on the phone. He recommended checking you out. I watched interviews of you by Nothing Media, and now I'm at this meeting because I decided I wanted to speak to you and hear more from what you had to say. For me to say this is effect without that cause, like, there has to be the two for this to happen. There has to be something that led to this.
So what you just told me was a story. That's a story of what apparently happened. There is only this. Talking to Jim Neiman isn't happening. This is what's happening. So everything you told me is just a story. The story of Neil going on a residential is just a story.
But it has to be something that really did happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to talk about it.
Yeah, that's the experience for the individual. Yeah.
I don't understand how we could
Well,
be
the
having.
individual will take that story and make it as being something real. I know that this led to this and to this and to this.
And so you would say that going to a residential with Jim and speaking to Jim didn't really happen?
Well, it's a story. So you could almost say, I mean, apparently it happened, but only as a story. There is only this appearing as a memory of going on a residential or going and speaking to Jim. That was all happening. So that is, all of that was happening within the story. So everything you're telling me that led up to this apparent what's happening is also, it's just a story. There is just this. But the memory of what apparently happened 5 minutes ago can arise, but that is still arising in this. So it isn't real in that sense.
But I don't understand. And of course, it might be because I still think I'm here and there's no one thinking they're there. You're saying there's only this, but this is different every 5 minutes. So after this meeting ends and you go and do whatever you do and I go and do whatever I do, that's something else. But this is happening now. So when that's happening then, this would have happened previously.
So the difference, perhaps, I'm just suggesting the difference between here and there is that there would be an experience of the meeting happening to someone, the end of the meeting happening to someone, and here there wouldn't be. There would just be what's arising. Yes, okay, there'd be a memory of a meeting, but that would be just what's arising as the immediacy of this.
I'm so confronted by this. It feels threatening because I feel like my whole reality is being challenged.
Yeah.
And I'm certain that my reality is real. I can't stop listening though, even though it feels physically painful to hear it.
So what's being suggested as being not real is there being an individual at the center of what's happening. Everything else is just what's arising, what's apparently happening, which actually includes that experience of being an individual, apparent experience.
And that is what's unknowable then, what you've just said, because I think I could know something. I can't even, what I was going to say, I know I probably don't, I can't even get a hold of anything.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing.
I'm probably not making sense what I'm saying right now, but I'm trying to really hold on to something solid.
It's ungraspable. There is nothing to hold on to. There's no one. It's not that there's nothing to hold on to. There is no one to hold on to it.
This is challenging.
Yeah, that's baked your noodle.
You're saying the misunderstanding all comes from the experience that I am here now and I'm real.
Yeah. So that's a claiming that comes out of that contracted energy in the body. It's a knowing. And how and the individual it seems to claim everything for itself, and it does this by trying to know everything, because it thinks that the more it can know, the safer and more secure it will be, because it feels that it will be in some kind of control of what's happening. And this is actually total free fall, or it would be if there was someone in it to be free falling. I
apologize for being so, I feel so angry, like I feel really angry, and I don't like, I don't want to offend you, but like, I think I need to be here or nothing would be happening. And you're saying that what appears is appearing regardless.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the individual likes to think it's God. Such a disappointment when it transpires that it isn't.
So I don't want to ask the same question over and over.
I wonder it's exhausting being an individual. God's
You're
a pretty big job.
Are you saying that this appearance is happening regardless of anyone being in it?
Well, there's no one in it.
So what is happening?
This is nothing appearing as what's happening.
And that's unknown there as well as...
There's nothing happening. There is nothing actually happening.
I hate hearing that above anything else, because I feel like I'm going to cry. Like, it's so painful to hear that.
You can call me anytime, Will. Grab my number off Facebook. If you fancy calling me later in the week and me making you cry again.
You'll regret saying that.
No, it's cool.
I do, Neil, even though I'm getting angry, I genuinely appreciate this.
Perfectly sane and rational response.
So thank you.
Love you, William.
Big Cash says you could be a wormhole. Yeah, well, there's no you. From iPhone. I think it's so obvious our reality is a simulation on a plane. Monica asks, the body is ill for no reason, is it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, illness can happen. It's not happening for anyone. Yeah, illness can happen. Yeah. Someone asked, does people influencing each other with emotions or thoughts when there is no one, like empath, that feels others' feelings? Well, there's no one influencing another's emotions, as in there is no person influencing another's emotions or feelings. Like empaths. Yeah, maybe can be more energetic sensitivity, yeah, in some bodies and others, yeah, maybe. I'm afraid that's out of my remit. Monica Sitars asks, does life have any purpose or meaning? No. And that's the freedom that's longed for, without meaning, without purpose. And that's not to say that inspiration can't arise or creativity can't arise. It's just that inspiration or that creativity has no purpose or meaning. It's just what's apparently happening. Rajiv asks, is knowing of unknowing also knowing? Yeah, absolutely. Diana D asks, this me tension is illusory because it appears and disappears. Yeah. So that contractedness, that contracted energy in the body is really just energy appearing as a contracted energy. So that contraction in itself isn't separate. There does seem to be a contraction that has a center and that has a position that it seems to support this separate experience. So when that energy releases or just sort of dissolves back into the boundlessness, then that whole experience just, there's nothing there to hold it up anymore. Ikash asks, I want to give, but I have to give up giving up in a way. Yeah, but then you're in that constant, I need to give up giving up, giving up, giving up. That's the dilemma for the individual. Yeah, well, this is a apparent dilemma. Yeah. I need to know that there's no me. I need to know unknowing. Yeah. How can you know unknowing? You can't. How can you give up giving up? The suggestion is there is no one who needs to give up. He's put her screwed. Thanks. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. There's no one screwed. Monica Sitars asks, why is it called unconditional love? Well, a conditional love would come with conditions. It would be there to meet. There would be certain requirements with that. It would have to look a certain way for it to be love. But unconditional love is it's free, entirely free.
Go ahead, William.
Neil, is this just a slow deconstruction of reality? Listening to this message.
It might feel like that, but no, there's no reality to deconstruct. There's nothing that needs to be deconstructed. That experience can sort of undo itself, can be.
Because earlier when I was saying to you, I want this more than anything, and it's so painful to listen to. I just hate it. Yeah. But but as much as I hate, it's not that I hate hearing it. It's both love and hate. But as painful as it is to hear this, it feels better than being a me seeking. But it does feel like, I don't want to say like the rug's getting pulled out from under my feet, although that's the analogy that's coming to mind, but it's just a slow, painful deconstruction of what I perceive to be my reality, with periods of relief interspersed in between the deconstruction phases.
Yeah, you talked about glimpses earlier. Sometimes a glimpse can be the worst thing that can happen to a person. Yeah.
Well, the most memorable glimpses, I didn't have them, but that happened were way before I'd come across this message. Yeah. So after the glimpses, there was always like, oh my God, that was incredible. I hope that happens again. But there was never a questioning. Well, I didn't know what it was, but there was never a looking into finding out what it was about or working it out. There was just a carrying on with my previous seeking, which was not of the nature of finding an answer or spirituality. But then I came across this message, probably similar to you, like almost by accident, like Jim Newman video. And even when I started hearing it, I didn't have a clue it was in relation to what had been seen in the glimpses. It was only after I started listening for a bit, I was like, that's what this is pointing to. So what do you mean when you say that a glimpse could be the worst thing that could happen to you? I just want to finish.
No. It is a glimpse of the natural reality in a way. The frustrating part of the glimpse is that the me will then sort of come back and try to add it to its experience, and it can't. It just can't be done. And if you won't be able to explain it, but if you've had a glimpse, you'll kind of get a feel for what's meant by that. It can't be added to an experience. There's no even reference point to even begin to describe what that is. And that glimpse is this. It's just hiding in the knowing of it. Seems to be hiding in the knowing of it, as we're speaking.
But the thing is, if this seems
all there is,
if this seems to be hidden apparently by the knowing of it, so what is never seen as it is, as long as there's someone feeling separate. And the example Tony always uses when I talk to him is a tree is never seen when you know the tree or when you're experiencing the tree. But what you're saying, there's no longer a sense of anyone being there. So when that body sees, or those eyes see a tree, there's no one who sees a tree in the real, natural way. So nothing's ever hidden in that sense.
Yeah. So, how do I put this? Could say in the revealing of the natural reality, there was a recognition that this had never seen a tree before.
Got it. Yeah. The only thing I can relate to that is in the glimpses, it was kind of recognized. I'd never heard music before. I'd never seen another person. That kind,
Which is why I kind of say, a bit of a joke, but I kind of say that the me is it's like a it's a me-shaped prophylactic.
I don't know what a prophylactic is.
Oh, preventative.
Oh, okay. But then
it sort of prevents the natural seeing of a tree in a way. Sees it through this fog of knowing.
Hearing you say that, it's impossible for me to not think that there's some kind of gain to the me not being there, because if I'm experiencing
what's actually being described as a loss, it's an unhappening. I heard it described as the other day. It's a loss of something, but it's actually ultimately in the end a loss of something that actually isn't real.
Because I'm trying to intellectualize this. There's no one there that's gained anything, even though there's apparent effects to the end of there's apparent effects of separation that are no longer happening.
It's in the end of an effect that was hiding the natural reality, if you want to call it that. So there wasn't an effect at the so-called end. It was the end of an effect, in a way.
So if the sense of separation doesn't fall away in the living body and the body carries on until the body dies and then the separation ends at that point, would you say there's no value? You've said there's no value to anything. It doesn't make a difference if the separation ends at the time of the body's death versus in the living body.
Well, no, because there is already no separation. So yeah, okay. So in the apparent sort of unveiling of the natural reality, maybe that happens in the last breath. Who knows? I don't know.
Right. Okay. Because well, the story is, I don't know how long it's been since, in terms of time, that Neil no longer was there as a separate experience. But I don't think, well, say you've had a year or 2 years, however long it's been, you've been enjoying and seeing the natural reality as it is for that time. But when you said about,
so.
But when you're saying that it could be hypothetically that in the last breath of the living body, the natural reality is kind of seen as it really is.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Okay, just hypothetically, but if there is no real time, then say, for example, that body now doesn't have a sense of self, can see the natural reality as it is. Even 10 years of that wouldn't be any different to like the split second of
no, absolutely
a glimpse of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't get my head around it.
I mean, the falling away is timeless. It isn't an actual falling away that happens along a timeline, because as is often said, what's recognized in the end is that it was never happening. So there was never a real experience to fall away. So there isn't an experience of the end of the experience.
It's also impossible, and you haven't said this in this meeting now, but I've heard other speakers say that this message is completely from unknowing. It's not something that's known or held. And I think to myself, how can you possibly say all of this without a realization of knowing how things really are?
To be fair, I mean, there would be a sort of a clarity around concepts and stuff, but that's not really what we're talking about here. It's ultimately not what's being shared. But no, this has no knowledge of what's being shared. You can kind of tell when someone is responding from knowledge, because there seems to be a long pause when there's a, how do I answer this? This response tends to be very immediate. There's no thought to what's being said. It just comes and
And even
but it's the same there. That's nothing special about this. It's actually, that's what's happening there too.
There's
It's
no
just
how
that
knowledge.
there is a claiming. It's just that there is a claiming of that.
So this, whatever this body or whatever this is doing or saying, is completely unknowing.
Absolutely, yeah, already.
And then I think I'm doing this, or I should do that, which is also unknowing.
The I claims the unknowing as a knowing.
And that can't be undone.
No, because it's not really happening.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you, William. Just a reminder, Neil, that it's already past 90 minutes, but I have a question here from Peter and a couple more questions. I'm not sure if you want to keep on going or...
I'm good for another 10 minutes, if that's okay with everyone.
Peter, go ahead. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Neil.
Hi, Peter. Hi.
Can you put words to the seeming experience of, I guess you could say, everything is always equally expressing, sharing this in a way?
Well, everything is always empty.
Yeah.
It's already empty, so it's not a case of there having to be something here that equally balances out with something here. That can sort of seem to be the case in a way, but actually what makes this the absolute is that it's in its emptiness, is its absoluteness.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Rajiv asks in the comments, oh, it disappeared. There we are. This message is so empty that people call it nihilism, but it's empty of empty also. Yeah, so nihilism is a belief, it's a position. I believe that there is nothing, which then I don't know a lot about it, but then kind of became a movement, a philosophy and a movement. So no, this isn't a philosophy. A philosophy, so a nihilism would be a way to try and understand something or make sense of something. Actually, nihilism is a way to try and give this meaning, even if that meaning is nothing. Straight to Stars asks, is there any human state like gratefulness, compassion, love, ecstasy, anything that you could relate to at least partially in order to describe this indescribable natural reality you talk about? Okay, so there's no one relating to compassion or gratefulness or love or ecstasy, but all of those can arise in exactly the same way as they arise there. The difference is, it's just that there is apparently something that's claiming that as being something that's happening to itself. First personhood asks, seeing is more effective than thinking. That's just a comment, thank you. And I think Tom Rowe Sprue asks, do you think U.G. Krishnamurti was talking about this? I'm afraid to say I don't know a great deal about Krishnamurti. I died before I got around to the Indian teachings. Is that Emerson asking a question, or was that just a kind of a general comment, Emerson?
That's a general comment.
It's a general comment.
I don't have
I
questions.
thought it was. Yeah. Did something happen, Emerson? I haven't got my glasses, so I have to keep moving in. I'm happy to call it a day there, Emerson, I think.
Yeah, thank you
Feels
so
like
much.
a nice hiatus. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for everyone that asked a question. Just a reminder that we have a meeting every day. And then on the weekend, there's Andrea's retreat. If you guys want to go to that one, it's on Saturday and Sunday. And Neil has a book called Already Everything. It's available on Amazon. It's a great book. I've read it finally.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's great. And thank you again, Neil. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye, Laura.
Bye. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.